Have you ever wondered where the problems in the world today would exist if we had deeper connection to ourselves, others, and the environment and acted from that place? Welcome to the Conscious Action Podcast with your host, Brian Berneman, who believe that connection is the key to taking conscious action as individuals and creating a better world. We are here to raise awareness and inspire meaningful action by sharing stories, knowledge, and conversations with thought leaders and change makers. From sustainability to well-being and everything related to conscious living, our mission is to empower you to be the change that you want to see in the world.
Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Conscious Action Podcast. I am Brian Berneman, your host, and I have the pleasure to be joined all the way from Colorado in the US by Maria Brinck. Thank you so much, Maria, for taking the time and for connecting once more with me. And for everybody that is here watching or listening to us, I would love it if you can share some about your life so far, your journey, and what led you to here.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Brian, for having me on your show. So excited to be here. I have a pretty, typical journey that I think a lot of your listeners can relate to. And I came over to Colorado as an international student from Sweden. I spent 4 years here in business school studying international business and got a really good job right out of college at GE, selling Oracle databases, enterprise solutions, and then I went over to pharmaceuticals later on for another big corporation here in America, and then biotechnology and medical device sales. It was very, nothing ordinary, but I did start to feel like, it was a lot of competition. It was all about the quota, meeting numbers. I definitely brought out the masculinity in myself. And I wasn't even willing to share best business practices because we were all competing, against each other, even on the internal team at the company I worked for, or companies that I worked for, to say so. And I realized there was something truly missing. And I think that missing is very common. I think a lot of people feel like, you wake up in the morning, you get your coffee, stress out the door, go to work. I mean, it's like you're in the hamster wheel, right? So it was then at that time where my life, I think, became a little bit more unique. And I quit my job. I was at the time on top of sales. My territory was number 2 in the nation, 2% in the nation, doing really well. And I just realized there were no money or perks they could throw at me that would make me stay. And I start reflecting on what I really wanted to do and what was missing. And I ended up moving to Cameroon in the Congo Basin rainforest to get away from corporate America and find what was missing. And there I did find it. So while working on the rehabilitation of chimpanzees and gorillas in the Congo rainforest, the second largest rainforest in the world, I realized it was connection that was missing. The simple fact of connection to myself, connection to people, connection to animals, connection to the environment, to nature, to trees. And I also find a lot of other things that helped me since then, but that was truly that I found was the missing piece. Yeah. So that is kind of a little window into my journey, if you will, Brian.
And so, you go to Cameroon, you have that experience, and you go back. What's that like for you? Like, I know my own experience of going to do something unique and then, in a sense, coming back into the more real world, let's call it. How was that experience for you, and what did you start noticing different about yourself and about this, what you're talking about, the different way that you started to realize about that connection?
Yeah, what I realized was, and you can't help to start comparing the two very different environments you're in, right? Automatically, you start comparing the Western world, that being United States of America for me at the time, but also being European, Europe, to what I was experiencing and observing there. And I realized that, and it was just by chance, it wasn't the reason I was there. What I came for, I've found, and that was the connection part. But what I find that surprised me was I start realizing how different things were run there, how leadership looked like. And that's when I start realizing the gift of that to the Western world, if we could just capture some of that and take it with us, right? So, for example, I saw, and just from observing, I was not even in leadership at the time, or I was not a leadership consultant, but I started noticing how the leaders there, the chiefs, were very much about their community and always invited community members to any decisions that needed to be made. There were also a tremendous balance between what I would call the masculine and the feminine within them. So they would not only take their time and sit down and be inclusive, but they also would speak last. And I thought, wow, they're speaking last. Just the opposite to what I was used to in corporate America, where the leaders is supposed to speak first and not to be questioned, right? So I saw that. I also saw how they took great care and respect to making decisions. It wasn't the fast break things, fix things later that you see in corporate America, right? It was really slowing it down, make sure that it's been looked at every single angle, and even including its impact on future generations, which as a simple thing as cutting down a tree, and I was like, wow. In the beginning, it was a little frustrating, thinking, what's the big deal, right? Let's just cut down this tree. And then I think the most fascinating thing, and that really got me thinking, and I think also summarizes the connection that I mentioned earlier, was that they had this incredible connection to everything around them, and respect. So not only the chimpanzees and the wildlife, we also had gorillas and forest elephants and other amazing creatures there, but it was the smallest of things as well. There was the fauna, the flora, and that connection was kind of their extended family. And it was so nice to see. And, the one thing that brought to me, Brian, was there's so much meaning in that. Yeah, and there's so much belonging in that, because when we tap into that, which makes sense, we're part of nature, nature's a part of us, we're not separated. And once you tap into that kind of mindset and energy, you never feel alone. You have tons of meaning in your life, something that I frankly feel is truly missing in our Western world. Where here the focus is on stuff, right? Things, titles, status, power. And yeah, I would lie if I said that I'm not somewhat attracted to that. Come on, I came from sales. But there needs to be a balance. And you cannot let go or sacrifice that connection, which unfortunately, I've seen, and going to when I came back to United States, kind of going back to your question a little bit more, what I wanted to do was to get into leadership, because I really wanted to have an impact on leadership in this country and in the Western world. And of course here I start working in coaching and executive coaching. A lot of executives they've sacrificed their relationships, their families, their relationship to their children, and I say wives because most of these men or top leaders are men. A lot of them have gone through divorce. They're traveling all the time. They're trying to meet, the core. And I get it. It's a lot of pressure. And I'm not saying it's easy. And I'm not blaming them. I'm just saying it's very important for them to open up to the price of that. And I do still think it's possible to have both.
Yeah.
And I try to put that into the coaching.
Yeah.
And I think they realize that they're very lonely.
Yeah. I mean, I work with a lot of people that the same. There's this sense for how our system, like it's set up here in the Western world, that we need to do that, and it's like sacrificing your health, sacrificing your relationships, just to be able to keep on rising up and remaining there. And as you're saying, I think that there's, for me, when I was able to slowly get introduced to different ancient wisdom teachings, and then when I was like living in the Tibetan Buddhist retreat center, for me, one of the biggest things, I think, that it was a change of perspective, a change of, as you're saying, there's things can be done differently than what I was used to. Things can be done with the sense of how we are interconnected with everything, how we are a part of everything, how everything actually matters. I had zero connection with nature up until that moment. Like I growing up and always living in concrete jungles, and I didn't have that connection. I even remember, like, for me growing up, I grew up with, if there's insects, you just smash them. And then, like, I started to practice Buddhist teachings, and it's like, like not harming any living being. And that was like a big shift. And one of the things I remember at one point, something that I don't know if you've had this experience, but I think that you did with some of the things I just shared, that we were at some like meetings, and I'm like, come on, like we can solve this in 5 minutes. It doesn't need to be like a 3 hour, 5 hour thing. And at one point when I came to New Zealand, I was doing there was some years ago at the university, these Maori people came to train us for being able to then teach to our students in this way. And it was, in a sense, something that was so interesting that we spent the first 3 hours, everybody just introducing themselves. Like, we literally didn't really start until everybody had the time to introduce themselves, to share about where their families came from, about their backgrounds, their perspectives, their understandings. And I asked at the end of the training, I asked the woman that was facilitating, and she said, if we don't take that time, we will never find the common ground to make decisions, because we are always making assumptions about what our understandings are. And she said, if I don't know where you come from, if I don't know your perspectives, if I don't know what you care about, if I don't know your values, how can we make decisions together? And I thought, how interesting, because at that moment I was teaching two classes at university. One had to do with mental health and well-being, and the other one was about social and sustainability change. And a lot of my students, and specifically on that one, they were like, we're running out of time. We need to, like, everything needs to be done fast. And I brought that into the space, and it was such an interesting thing. How do we balance that? How do we balance the urgency of creating the changes that we see that we need, we need to come together, we need to connect, we need to find common ground, we need to connect as humans as well, and connecting with the environment, and then understanding, okay, from there we can make decisions.
Exactly. I mean, the irony in your story, Brian, is that, you need to go slow to go fast. So you need to have that strong connection, understanding the people around, not only yourself, which is a full-time job, but also the people around you. What do they truly value? When do they feel alive? What's their purpose? What are their unique strengths? And once you know that, the decision making speeds up, in my opinion. And it's not one that you're gonna second guess later. You make a decision and then you're like, well, maybe that, you get the decision right the first time, which is really gonna save you time. Yeah. So the irony of it all, right? There's just so much that can be learned there. Yeah. And it's sad that, because I think we lose so much in the speed of the society. We don't pay attention to what's actually important. We just live in a very reactive reality, where you react to the latest and greatest email, or the fast paced on the latest notification kind of, and there goes day, there goes your hour, there goes your day, and that's your life. And I mean, we really need to become more aware and conscious of what's happening around us and how to slow things down.
Yeah. I remember a few years ago I was working with the business, and on one of the first few sessions that we had, I asked everyone to share why they were there.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because some people just said, even though they were a little bit afraid to say it, and they said, I'm here because of the money.
Yeah.
Like, this pays my bills, that's it. And other people were like, I love what this organization stands for, and and the interesting thing with that was that not only people didn't know about each other in terms of their reason for being there, but also there was one person that came the following week, came to me and said, I was so frustrated with this person that they weren't taking my calls after hours, that they weren't actually going above and beyond, and now I understand. They didn't care about it. And I was getting frustrated, but they don't care as much as me. And I was like, that's a great realization, But it's this, as you're saying, we don't, or we haven't taken the time to connect, to know each other, to understand. And as you're saying, there's a lot of times competition internally even, that it creates more friction than anything.
Yeah, it truly does. And I also like what you said, Brian, about perspectives, because I think that if there's one thing that I brought with me from living very simple, is the perspective. Like, you don't really need that much, we get so caught up in all the things externally that we think that we need. And, the latest this, the latest that, that's just stressful in itself in this, very consumer-based society that we live in, instead of realizing you kind of have everything you already need. It's within you, and that's also where that confidence and where happiness and meaning lives. Something else I thought you mentioned earlier that I kind of want to go back to is that crisis that I think we see right now with the loss of connection to nature. And you said it that yourself, you like most of us in the Western world, we grew up in towns, and there is asphalt everywhere, and big buildings and streets, and you're lucky if there's a park nearby, right? And I think that's very dangerous when children do not have that connection with nature growing up. I think a lot of people become adults and have never had the connection, and it almost becomes a crisis because they don't have that sense of connection to the oneness and to the belonging that we talked about earlier. And the beautiful thing growing up in Sweden, which is really on the forefront on so many levels, that could be another for another show, and I can speak about that, which is also my passion. But the one thing I remember profoundly is a program we have in Sweden, and still to today they do. It's called Mulle. Mulle is a troll who connects with children in nature and teach them about nature and the connection to all things. And it's a school, if you will, or classes that children in Sweden get before they start preschool. So, you're usually around 4 or 5 years of age. And as far as I know, every single Swedish person had some shape or form of those classes. And it just, when you bring nature in and the connection to nature early on, I think it profoundly changed your life. And if there's one thing I've heard people say to me when I say I'm Swedish, or maybe two things, but the one thing that really stands out is that, oh, you're so grounded. You're so grounded. Not to say that I really know what that exactly means. I should probably ask, what do you mean by that? But I think it has probably something to do with that foundation and connection to nature, because I think once you have that and you understand that all the noise and chaos that we humans create in our society, you can always go back to that very calm, quiet place, and you're going to have everything you need right there. And it's beautiful. So I think it just makes you less, what should I say, sensitive or open to be swayed in all different kind of directions, and the latest this and the latest diet or the latest outfits, or you have to have this. And it's like, no, I don't. So
Yeah.
I want to think that program is truly, to me, it was very, and I know to my brothers, it was tremendous. And we also have a lot of, growing up, we were very fortunate. We had a little summer cottage, which is pretty common in Sweden, and it was in a nature reserve, so that helped as well. So unlike you, I actually did grow up with nature very close by. But then, of course, coming here, as I mentioned, 4 years of college, then 8 years in corporate America, I kind of got separated. And then, of course, I found it back in Cameroon. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think that there's something in that for me, that reconnection allowed me to make different decisions. And it's not
Yes.
that, like, it's not that I stopped buying things. It's not that I stopped participating in this Western society. It's just that I started to make decisions differently because I started to understand the impact of my choices and my decisions and my purchases, and deciding to understand, okay, like there's different practices for how to make a t-shirt, so I'm going to choose as much as possible organic, fair trade practices. The same for my food. Like there's so many different things that can be done. Like I mostly walk to work, and there's just small decisions that I started to make based on that connection and understanding the ripple effect that we all have, and how I show up for other people as well. Like when being able to be present, being able to be open, to be more compassionate and understanding that yes, people have gone through different things, and I don't know them. So can I meet them where they are? And this has, as you're saying, that the connection with ourselves, that it's a lifetime of a process. But for me, a lot of it has come down to something that I would love for you to share a little bit more. That was, I started to get more understanding on my different aspects, and especially that masculine and feminine aspects, to be able to bring more balance and then show up in that way into the world. And this is something that last time when we spoke, you shared a little bit more about this masculine and feminine paradigm.
It's definitely one of my passions, and I'm even thinking, even before I go there, something you said that about consumption. In my book, The Leadership We Need, I have a lot of reflective questions, and one of them is, how is your next consumption or purchase going to bring well-being in your life? And I think that is a question that we should all ask ourselves when we purchase something, because most likely it's not going to bring any well-being into our lives. It might be exciting that day, but overall, not so much. But going into, so I like that question a lot. And then there are a lot of other questions that I think are very helpful to become more grounded and not so swayed by all this commotion out there of all the things we think that we need, and actually when we need something very, very different. But going back to the masculine and feminine, and I kind of talked a little bit about how I myself was caught up in the masculine, and it's easy to go there because this society, I would say all of the Western world, but maybe even on steroids in the United States, is the fact that masculinity is more valued than the feminine. Let's just face it. And you see it in society overall. You see it in business. You see it particularly in leadership. And I think we've come to a realization for those of us that awaken to the crisis we're in. I mean, not just the crisis of nature that we talked about, and the disconnect to nature, but we are really in a poly crisis. Climate change, loss of ecosystems, biodiversity. We don't have any global regulation on AI, neither on biotechnology. I mean, these are powerful, intelligent things that we have created, nuclear weapon, but there's really not much wisdom around it. And that's where the feminine comes in, to balance the power with wisdom. And it's not necessarily men and women, it's more the masculine and the feminine within us, right? So it takes inner work. And what I bring up in the leadership we need, and I actually even have some graphs on the back there, is if we're going to perform at our best, both individually as humans, I have right there, you can see greatest potential or peak performance in that triangle or pyramid. We really need to have that balance between the masculine and feminine, because if we're too masculine, and I've been there, it's not sustainable. There's a reason why I quit my job and moved to Africa. And if I'm too feminine, that's not good either. I'm just floating around. I don't take a stand. So we need that balance between the two to perform at our best. And then, of course, there's going to be a range within all of us. But the key is to show up as your full potential with both, in somewhat of a balance. And unfortunately, I would argue that we don't see that at all. And the cost to us at this point, the stakes are just too high to not have that. And then you can see on a collective side as well, we need to get a full representation of humanity into leadership. That would be, we talked about the indigenous population. 5% of our population on this globe sits on 80% of our biodiversity. If we don't get them in and hear them and their voices, I don't know how we're going to survive over the next decade. It's frankly where we need to get their voices heard. They have wisdom that you and I can only imagine. And we need to get women and other minorities. We can no longer have half of humanity on the sidelines. It's not just that it's the right thing to do. More importantly, it's the thing we need. And we need that diversity of thought now more than ever, considering where we're at. That masculinity, It's good and it's served us very well. We've lived in a very aggressive times. Back in the days, our society was 500 times more aggressive and violent, believe it or not, considering I feel like it still is. But back then, yes, we needed the strong men probably, and we were, living in small tribes, and I probably would have loved one of those leaders to protect me and my family. Today, we need people that are actually capable and qualified to lead, that bring in the experts, whether it's on climate change, on biotechnology, on AI, on nuclear. We need to be led by expertise in science, and this wisdom from the population I just mentioned. And unfortunately, that is not what we're seeing in the world today. So the book, The Leadership We Need, is all about changing our mindset around leadership. One that I believe is going to serve us much, much better, and is also invested in humans and planetary well-being and our very survival. It's interesting, Brian, because before I wrote the book, The Leadership That We Need, I did a pilot. I actually had 3 schools here in Colorado, 2 universities and a high school. And I asked one question. I asked, do you feel that our current leadership has looked out in service of our well-being and our very survival? And this is over 100 students. Not a single student, including in the business program, by the way, said, yes, they have. Not a single student. And I thought, wow, I'm not alone. And I think we can all feel this, and it's scary. We truly don't have the leadership we need.
Yeah. And there's something, in what you're saying, it took me back to when I think it was almost like now 20 years ago when I was doing my postgrad in neuroscience, that my teacher was, sharing a lot of things during the postgrad. I remember something that he said at one point. He said, as we are learning about, like how our brains operate and these different like systems that we have internally, he said, women are more primed to be our leaders. Like they are supposed to be our leaders, because we men said we are mostly, especially, I think that he was mixing up a little bit of the masculine and feminine as well, but he said like we are much better in, single like tasks, action, and women have a more holistic perspective. And now with time, I realize how, in a sense, yes, that's true. I would much rather our leaders be women. And importantly, it needs to be women that have a balanced energy, because a lot of women that have risen to positions of leadership had to become so masculine that they are behaving a lot like men as well. So that's also an interesting aspect of, as you were saying, like bringing this balance that we need. And yes, how do we bring that? And I actually had this conversation the other day with my partner, like how do we go to a place of power without having to lose ourselves and our values, so that we can play the game as what it is now, which is, like fighting power with power, or with strength, or with fighting, and how can we do it differently? And I think that one of the things for me that I often share with my students about leadership is my approach to leadership is I know that my students are looking at me. How am I behaving? How am I showing up? How am I doing things? That's my leadership. It's not just what I am teaching, it's what I'm showing and how I'm being.
That's it. It's all about how you show up. And that's why in the book, I didn't want to overemphasize on women, because exactly to what you were saying, if I give a few examples of women, and they're not the type of leaders that we need. And it's exactly that they are often even overcompensating the masculine, probably because they feel like maybe they're not adequate enough in their feminine. And so it becomes even worse. And I agree with you. I actually have studies and a lot of research in the book, and we look at the masculine and the feminine, and now I go into our individually, like, you know, masculine would be short-term focus, feminine would be long-term focus. And I'm thinking about, and there are 5 things I would like to mention here, because you can see what we consider where we're at in the world today and the challenges we have. Right? What mindset do you think is going to be the best? So again, short term versus long term. You have the masculine being revenge versus reconciliation. You have masculinity being daring, and you have the feminine being cautious. You have the masculine being egocentric. You have the feminine being empathetic. And you have the personality of masculine being adventurous, and you have the feminine with the responsibility. Responsible. So you can see, like, we need both, and we very much has been leaning to the masculine, and we should be very thankful that we have for as long as we had. I mean, we come up with some amazing things, and we should be super proud over that. But at this time, it's just not sustainable. We cannot continue because of the things we just talked about, with sitting with nuclear and unregulated AI and climate change that is happening right in front of us. We need to become more of the long-term, the reconciliation to solve our wars and the aggression that we're seeing, and this mindset of, here's another interesting thing. I just had to throw it in here because I think it's really going to resonate with you. We even need to tell ourselves better stories. We have this story of, we're always going to have wars. There's always going to be aggression. Humans have always been that way and always will be. Absolutely not true. Because we never had another type of leadership. We have always had a small subset of humanity leading us. And not just men, but men of a very, very specific, with very specific qualities, what we just talked about. The daring, the egocentric, the adventurous, the short-term focus, the revenge. That's exactly what we had for 10,000 years since the dawn of civilization. Of course, it looks like we're super aggressive and always going to kill each other. But the reality is we also have love and compassion and caring and cooperation. And we just don't see that in leadership because it's not being valued and it's not being incentivized.
Yeah.
Look at any society. The jobs of caring are the lowest paying jobs out there, where you have leaders of power and AI and biotechnology and pharmaceutical and et cetera, and they're paid 400 times that of the average employee of that same company. You want to talk about what we value? There it is.
Yeah.
And it's just not sustainable.
Yeah.
And another interesting thing is, ironically, I think with AI, we might even realize that the jobs that are finally going to be left are going to be the more feminine, that we're actually going to have to be more empathetic and caring. And those jobs that's not, the AI is not necessarily, at least not the second AI that we're most likely going to get to in our lifetime, is not going to have quite those capabilities yet. So we actually have the nonlinear in AI, and maybe the nonlinear, the feminine, is going to become more relevant. So maybe that would be a good thing coming out of AI. Who knows? But you can see how it's truly not serving society at this point in our history, and it's just not sustainable considering what's at stake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maria, as you're sharing this, especially what you shared about doing different stories, I remember, I think that it was 3 years ago, I was speaking at this climate change conference, and I asked everyone that was attending, I asked them to tell me how the future looks like. Because I was trying to get away from we need to fight this, we need to stop this. I was like, what's your vision of the future? If we want to get to your vision of the future, then we need to take the steps. But what's your vision of the future? And so I got them to just take a moment to, to think about it. And then I started, asking people to share. And everybody was like, well, we no longer have this, we no longer have that. And I was like, thank you, but let's stop for a moment. What do we have? Like, how does it actually look like? Not in comparison to this. And I realized that most people couldn't even see a version of the future where we are thriving, where we are in connection, where we are not separate. And it's so ingrained that it was so hard. And one woman came after the session and she was, I've never even thought about this. And she's a climate activist, and I've never even thought about that. And that's so much power, I think, that on the stories that we tell ourselves, and having that vision, of not having to fight everything, but also being able to create something different. And I think that there's so much value in that. And, I love what you're sharing, because I have a perspective as well that, and this was interesting during the pandemic. It showed what are the jobs that are actually, like essential. We had essential workers, and they were all the lowest paying workers that we have. And I was like, well, this is showing us something, right?
Exactly.
And now it's with AI, it's the same. Like I tell people, like I have a vision of the future for many years where work is not how we make a living, where we can live life without work being the way that we need to actually make a living as it is now. And I do believe, as you're saying, that different advances in technology like AI and robotics are going to actually do a lot of the linear works. So then our creativity, our love, our empathy, our, non-linear, more feminine aspects, that connection, are going to be prevalent. I was looking the other time that I can't remember in which country. I think that potentially it was in Japan, that people are actually working as companions, like just someone there to be with you, literally having a human next to you as you're going for a walk or going to the shopping mall or whatever it is that you need to do of your chores. I was like, this is the disconnection that we have, that now people are needing to be paid to have that connection. And like, yes, there's a lot of things in the world that are challenging, but I do think that there's ways to go in that direction. I tend to be an optimistic person, grounded, but optimistic, because I do see, with people like you that go and experience different things, people like me that go and experience different things, and then we bring them and we touch as many people as we can touch and have a ripple effect with that, but we're bringing something different. And I think that that's always positive.
Yeah, but it's interesting, Brian, because you and I share the same vision, because that's exactly the same vision I have. And but I do also think, well, let's stick with that vision for a second. I do think that AI is going to take out or take over the grind, right? So we can actually focus on family relationship, spending time with our children, spending time with our loved ones, caring for each other. And I think it could be a beautiful, beautiful society to live in. And but I also think to get there, though, I think one thing that we might need to consider is, because everybody that I've talked to in AI and AI security, et cetera, and mostly just the people that are involved in cracking the code, it tends to be the same masculinity that we talked about earlier. It's young men. They want to make the big bucks. They want to be the next, big technology guru, and they're fast, break things, figure things out later. That kind of mentality. What I would like to see in AI, in the development of AI, in the implementation, in the building and implementation, is a more diverse team, where more of a full set of humanity again is involved in the building and the implementation of AI, and the development, of course. So right now, that's not what I'm hearing, and I'm not seeing it. And I hope that it's going to be more open for everybody to feel like, and because I think we need, again, we have the power, we have the intelligence, but do we have our human wisdom in the development and building and implementation of it? We don't. But in the end, I have the same vision as you, and I really, truly hope that that's the case. And in the leadership we need, I really end on an amazing vision for the future. I don't know if I would say I'm optimistic. I think I'm just realistic. I don't know. Who knows? It's hard to kind of assess, but I truly believe that we can do so much better than we're doing right now. And we can live in a world, and I don't feel it's naive. We can live in a world mostly free of aggression and wars. We can live in a world free of poverty. We actually already know that. We've known that for the last 50 years. We have enough resources and food for everybody. We can live in a world free of pollutants. We don't need to pollute the environment. That's just a consequence of poor business decisions and national decisions, poor leadership, frankly. And this could really be a beautiful place. Speaking of pollution, I mean, what really saddens me currently, and this brings you down the severity of where we're at, besides losing, 70% of our biodiversity in the last 5 decades, a baby born today in 2025 is born with 285 chemicals in the core blood. This is not a success of humanity. It's not a success of leadership and the people in power making good decisions for us. We want to talk about well-being. We're not setting up our next generation for well-being. We know that over half of those 287 chemicals are directly linked to cancer. Then there is the mental health aspects of it, the learning disabilities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is not acceptable. And I would argue that nobody thinks this is acceptable, but it's just not talked about. But if we're going to talk about well-being and our very survival, these facts needs to come up in the open. And we need to say we can no longer continue having these particular type of men and masculinity in power making decisions. The cost is too great, and we're not setting ourselves up for success.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think that
there's no reason why they need to be born with 287 chemicals. We can do so much better than that. Yeah, I think
that, just as you shared when you talk to all of those students and ask that question about, do you feel like, your well-being and your survival is, in their interest or in their decision making. I think that this is a part of that every single person, actually, I believe, that is a, kind human being that actually cares about all of this. The problem is that so many of us, we're just in survival mode. We are in that automatic, pilot, and that, as you called it at the beginning, that hamster wheel, that there's no actual time to notice and to then do something. And that is a lot of times, I think, that one of the challenging things, and one of the reasons why this system it works the way that it is, because most people, even if they care, they are not able to do anything, because either they don't have the time to acknowledge it or to realize it or to do something about it. And it's this that I think that the more that we have conversations like this, the more that we have resources, the more that we take time to connect with people, to have conversations, the more that we're going to create these shifts in society, as you're saying, like we have this vision now. Okay, how do we get there? That's another thing. But
I think the key is going to be, we really need to redefine how success looks like. What is success? Yeah. Because I think there is a reason why people are so unhappy, and it's because the success that we were told, the story that we were told, the narrative that what a successful life looks like is actually not success at all.
Yeah.
It's frankly the problem, where we are taught, get a good education, get a good paying job, start a family, get a big house, get a 3-door garage, travel the world, find paradise, go to paradise on your vacation, when paradise is nowhere to be found. It's here. Simple as that. So I think we're focusing on all the wrong things. And until we get that fixed, what defines success, we're going to be in the hamster wheel, and people are going to feel that they can't get out. The bills to pay, their kids that needs to go to college, we need food on the table. But until we actually realize that there is no true happiness there, until, it's a change of mindset, it's a change of narrative. And I don't know how many people we need to hear, like, yes, you need to be comfortable. And in America and in Europe, that's about 70,000 a year. That's comfortable. Over that, we know that it doesn't buy any happiness, no meaning, no belonging, nothing additional. So 70,000. So I get that we need to pay certain bills and we need to have comfort. I get that. And I'd be the first to admit that I've been there and I want that. But beyond this excessive type lifestyles, and also in the cost to the environment, it's frankly, we need to start looking down on those people, not looking up to those people. I mean, those are also the same people that are polluting our planet. Let's face it. They are the ones with that high carbon footprint. They're flying, they're big boats, they have big cars, extravagant lifestyles at the expense of our health, our air, our water, our land. So it doesn't look very much like a success to me. And frankly, maybe they should take a little bit more responsibility as well. Yeah. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah. I love that. I have talked so many times about redefining success, because yes, that makes a huge difference in them, how we are living our lives, what we are changing in a sense, and we need to be a lot of times modeled. That we need to be shown. That's the type of, as you're saying, the leadership that we need. Maria, I'm just aware of our time. We could keep on talking for hours. But I just wanted to ask you just a couple of last things before we wrap up for today. And the first one is, what's the one thing that you wish everyone in the world knew?
Well, I think this connection that I mentioned earlier would be a good one to take with you from the podcast today. But since you already touched on that, there's one other quick thing that I think could help a lot of people. And, we hear about meditation and all of those things, but the reality is a lot of people are so busy that they don't even feel like they have not only the time, but the space, mental space for it. But something that I would recommend, and I recommend this to many of my clients with extremely busy lives, is, you only need to take 2-3 mental breaks per day to really change your outlook on things. And what I mean by 2 to 3 breaks means you just become aware. You just go into your 5 senses. You go out, you have a coffee on the deck of your house. Hopefully you're working from home that day. You smell the coffee, you taste the coffee, you hear the birds, you see the change on the leaves in the fall, you smell the ground, you feel the wind on your skin, you bring all the senses to life, and it just slows your life and your day down. And it only takes literally a minute to bring out those senses. And if you do that 2-3 times a day, it really calms your nervous system, and it sets you up to be more focused and happier and just feeling more energized. And it's a really quick fix, and it's just all about being aware.
Yeah. There's a lot of times that when I'm teaching meditation and mindfulness practices, I know that mostly I'm teaching to really busy people, and I usually tell them, forget about what you know about meditation. Meditation is just about being present and aware. How we do that, then there's so many different ways, and what you just shared is, it's one of them. It's just creating even 1 minute of space. A lot of times I tell some of my clients, just go, like, get out of your desk and just go, even if it's to the bathroom.
Yes.
Take a few deep breaths. That's it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
all that you need to do. And that might be enough
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
create some self-regulation so that then
Yes.
you can continue with your day. So, yeah, thank
It's
you.
funny. I've done exactly that. When people don't have a sunny deck to go out to, I've used the bathroom as well. But it's all that it takes, because the key is to get out of your head, and into your body and the senses. And and it comes very much with that breathing, and it really does not take a lot of time. But the key is to remember it. And the bathroom breaks are a great time to remember it, because we all need to go to the bathroom at some point.
Yeah, definitely. I often share, like, we need to anchor with something we are already doing. So if it's going to a bathroom, we do it then. And lastly, Maria, where can people find more about you, your work? Where can they find the book as well if they're interested in, like, reading and knowing more about the leadership that we need?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for asking, Brian. Exciting. The leadership we need, a new mindset for a brighter future. It came out in New Zealand today. So it's out and available on hopefully all your favorite online stores and in bookstores. And you can find me online at LinkedIn, Maria Brinck, Brinck, Brinck. And you can check me out on my website as well. And I would love to connect and continue the conversation. And I think, we really need to create a conversation and a movement around this new type of leadership that we need to have a brighter future. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank
But
you.
the future will be bright, it really, it really can be. So that's the good news. We have everything we need within us and around us. So I'm not too worried, but we need to get to it.
Yeah, definitely. I will put those links on the show notes so that everybody, it's easy to find it. For everybody watching and listening to us, what did you hear? What resonated with you? What was new and interesting? Perhaps leave us a comment, whatever it is that you're finding this conversation. Thank you, Maria, for taking the time, for connecting once more, and for what you're sharing in the world as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And thank you, everyone, for being here. And I'll see you all on the next episode. Bye.
What did you like the most about this episode? Take a moment to think about what change you can make in your life today.
Share your conscious action on social media using #ConsciousAction and tagging @ConsciousActionNZ so we can celebrate your impact on the world and create a ripple effect.
One easy action we would love for you to take right now is to share, like, and subscribe to this podcast. This will help us get these messages out into the world and inspire more people to take conscious action in their own lives, contributing to the better world we hope for.